So let's start with a prayer, shall we? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to you for all the blessings that we have. We're grateful for the wonderful church that we had the opportunity to be in, all the nice weather we have, the great schools that we had the chance to go to, and all the other blessings in our lives. We know that there are so many people in the world that do not have these types of things, and we're going to talk tonight about someone who worked with those people. We ask that you send St. Teresa of Kolkata here to be with us so that she can help impart some of her wisdom to us, some of the things from her life that she wants us to take with us from here tonight. And I ask that she also speak to me about the points of her life that she thinks are the most important for you to hear right now. We ask all this in Jesus' name, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. So as I said, we're going to be speaking tonight about St. Teresa of Kolkata. Otherwise, you guys might know her as Mother Teresa. If you want to turn to page 126 and 127 in your workbooks, the write-up on her is in there. You guys will recognize her. She's a contemporary saint from modern times. She's actually only been a saint for 6 years, but those of us that were alive when she was still alive, she died in 1997, know that at that time we're like, if she doesn't make it to sainthood, we're all doomed. There's just no way, because she just led that kind of life. And the funny thing is that it was not the life that she thought she would lead. She wanted to just kind of be a recluse and away from everything, and yet she was basically on the world stage, and everybody in the world knew who she was. And it's not at all what she wanted her life to be like. But it turns out that was actually God's mission for her. So we'll talk a little bit about her early life and how she got where she was. Again, she was born in 1910, so like 112 years ago. She's an ethnic Albanian. So Albania is a small country just north of Greece, kind of in the Balkans, East Europe area. And so if you know where Greece is, it's just north of there. Currently, the city that she's from is Skopje, which is the capital of a country called North Macedonia. That's the country now. But this area, the boundaries change, about as often as the weather changes, over the last several hundred years. It's just a constant rewriting of the boundaries. But basically, she's kind of in an area just north of Greece. She's an ethnic Albanian, but the country she would live in now would be called Macedonia, but it's been part of Bulgaria, it's been part of Albania, it's been part of Greece, it's been part of the Ottoman Empire, all in the last 120 years. And so it's a very kind of tumultuous area that she's from. But so being born in 1910, she was born right before, a very huge historic event, World War I, which was in 1914. And the area that she was in, it wasn't, there was some fighting going on down there. Most of the fighting was going up north, but it was still, all of Europe was involved in this. And so she had a couple of brothers and sisters. I don't remember the exact number. I didn't really get into those kind of details too much. But I did learn some stuff about her mother and her father. Both of them were huge influences on her life, which you would expect. But knowing the person that Mother Teresa became is a product of who her parents were. They were both very generous. They were fairly well off. They weren't like super wealthy, but they weren't like very poor either. And they lived in a nice house. When poor people would come and knock on the door, they would give them stuff to eat. And so this was just what they did. And her father, I don't remember what he did, but he was fairly well known in the community. So when there was an uprising one day, they came and sought his help. And because of that, because he was willing to help the people that needed help, it turned out that by the time that she was 8 years old, that he was murdered. He was assassinated, basically. They poisoned him. Somebody poisoned him, and it was probably some of his political enemies. And, which was a real shame because he really was a very good man. But, this is what some people do. And so this obviously left a big mark on Agnes, which was Teresa's born name. She was born Agnes. What is it? It's a very funkily pronounced name. Agnes Gonxha Bojaxhiu was her birth name. Okay, so Agnes, from a young age, she had already lost one parent. And so they struggled a little bit, but her mother never lost that spirit of generosity that had been part of their family. And so by the time that Agnes was 18 years old, she already felt the calling to become a nun. And so she followed that calling, and she joined an order called the Sisters of Loretto. And they sent her to Ireland at the time to kind of get her started. Now, the political climate at the time was such that in 1918, this is right at the tail end of World War I. World War I ended in November. This is like in August. So this is right as the war is kind of winding down. Things weren't great, and the political climate was pretty. It was rough. And so by her leaving the country, her mother knew, and she pretty much knew too, that they were never going to see each other again. Because her mother said, the way that this government is going, they're not going to let you back in, and I'm not going to be able to come out and see you. And so basically at the age of 18, she knows she's saying goodbye to her mother for the rest of her life. And but she knew that this was her calling to become a nun. And so she followed this calling. And so she was in Ireland for about 3 or 4 months, and as she joined the order, and then they sent her off to India for more of her training as a novitiate. And so this is in about 1920, about 1928, 1929, when she leaves for Ireland. And so she gets to India, and she's part of an order of nuns, and she's got kind of a typical nun's habit, kind of a lot of black with a little bit of white in it. And so she looked just like what you think of nuns look like today. And so she was in an order of teaching nuns. And so in India, you don't have like all the different classes of people like you have here. You basically have really rich and really poor. And that's about it. There's a few people in between, but there's not much of a middle class. And with the way that India's primary religions were Hinduism and Muslim, the Hinduism influence, basically, they have this caste system set up. So basically, if you're born poor, you can never not be poor. If you're born rich, you're always going to be rich. And so people don't really have an incentive to move up. If you're poor, you can't work really hard and become rich. It just doesn't happen there. And part of that is that the part of this caste system basically says that because they believe in reincarnation, that you are trying to live out, you're trying to pay for the sins of your past life if you're poor. And if you're rich, well, you must have done something good, and so you're being rewarded in this life. And so this idea of being reincarnated all the time, and reincarnation is not true, but this is what they believe. And so basically, if you're poor, you're stuck there. And so they were teachers for some of the rich people in India. And at the time, India was occupied by Great Britain. And so there were some British students there, but there was a lot of richer Indian students that went to this school. And so from about she took her final vows in 1937, but she was a teacher during that whole time. She became the principal of the school, and she just kind of, lived within the walls of this school for about 15, 16, 17 years. And she knew what was going on the outside, but they were kind of removed from it, okay? Because their concern and their mission as those nuns was to teach these richer students. And so she was called away to on a retreat in a town called Darjeeling, which I don't know exactly where that is in relation to Calcutta, but it's a train ride distance away. And so in September of 1946, I think it was September 10th, it was a day that changed her life. She is in the train station, and she's out amongst all these really poor people. And it's just, I watched a couple movies on her, and the way they show it, they're just poor people just pressing in. It's just this total crowd of poor people. And they're just all begging, and they're all asking for things. And it's not like she's frightened, but it's really, the level of poverty is starting to affect her. She's just like her eyes are being opened to this level of poverty that's just so overwhelming. And she's just, she's seen people that are begging, and she's seen people that are laying on a mat on the pavement, and everybody's walking by this person, and they're obviously dying, and nobody's doing anything. Because in this society, again, you're sentenced, if you will, to live out your karma. You live out what's going on in your life. And so if you're sick and dying on the pavement, well, you have to work that out. That's what they basically say. And so people typically don't help people that are hurt and that are injured. They just kind of let them defend for themselves. And so she's seen all this and just nobody doing anything to help. Nobody's giving them any handouts. Nobody's helping the sick. And she sees this one man laying on a mat, and she just feels compelled to go over to him for some reason. And she kind of gets down and she's kind of like face to face with him, and he looks her in the eye and he just says, "I thirst." And she remembers those words as one of the last words of Jesus on the cross, where he's saying, "I thirst," meaning he's thirsting for souls. But it's also, he says he thirsts, and then the Roman soldier gives him the wine on the sprig of hyssop, and then he dies immediately after that. And so she hears that, "I thirst," and she just can't get that out of her mind. It's just totally, all she can see is Christ in this poor man. And she's just captivated by this for a time. And then she goes off on a retreat, and she comes back, and in her prayer, all she can hear, all she can see is this, "I thirst." And this becomes part of her prayer life. And her prayer life was really good before this, but it really intensifies at this point. And something that we find out later is that during this time, after that time in 1946, for the next few years, she's actually receiving inner inspirations from Jesus and from Mary. Now, it's unclear as to whether she was actually seeing them or not, but it wasn't like where we're praying and we get this inspiration. It's like, I wouldn't have thought of that. She actually felt like she was being instructed by Jesus and Mary. She never really came out and fully said, they appeared to me and told me to do this, but she knew that what she was being told was coming directly from Jesus. And he would speak as if it was coming from him. And so she started to feel called, like, I've got to do something. I have to go out and help these people. And so she approaches the Mother Superior of the order, and the Mother Superior is like, well, that's a great thing that you want to do, but our mission here is to be teachers and to run this school, and you're the principal of the school. And so this is what we need to do. You can't go out there. And she keeps insisting, and she says, all right, well, you basically have two choices. You can stay here and be in the school, or you can be laicized, meaning you're not a nun anymore, and you can go out and help those people. She goes, well, I know I'm called to be a nun, so there's got to be a way to do this. So she was speaking with her spiritual director, and he suggested that perhaps she could get permission from Rome to form another, like a suborder, or form a little order where she could go off and do this work. And it wasn't like she set off to like, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do all this stuff. She basically just wanted by herself to go out and help these people. And so she wanted permission to do that. And so her spiritual director helped her, kind of get the paperwork for that, and it took some time. But in late 1948, for the first time, she was able to leave the convent and to be able to go out and do this. But she wasn't as a nun in the Order of the Sisters of Loretto. She was just kind of herself. And so this is where she stopped wearing the black and white habit, and the habit that you're used to seeing of her with the white with the blue stripes on it. She found this material somewhere in Calcutta, like at a bazaar, and adopted this as the garb for what she was going to wear doing her missionary work. And so she set out doing that. And so for a time, she joined up with not joined the order, but just kind of worked alongside another order to get some medical training. She went off for like 4 months into another area, and she got some medical training because she knew that she was going to be dealing with the sick and the dying. And she does this for a time. And then by 1949, she's back in Calcutta, and she starts doing her thing. And she just basically goes out and starts helping people. And so she's caring for people who are laying there dying in the street. And she winds up being able to acquire this old building, and then just starts bringing them there and starts caring for them there. And one by one, some of her former students from the convent, as they get old enough, they just start joining her and helping her out. They weren't nuns, they were just coming to help her out. But as time goes on, this thing starts to grow a little bit. And suddenly she's got about 10 or 11 of her students are helping her and other people in the community. And, we look at this, we're like, wow, this looks great. This is like she's helping people. But the people in the area looked at this and they said, this is terrible. You need to get out of here. You need to stop doing this because you're just trying to baptize people, make them Christians. And she's like, no, I really am just trying to help people. She wasn't going out there and saying, you need to convert to Jesus or you're going to rot in hell. She wasn't doing that. She was just helping people. And that's all she was doing. She was caring for them. She was loving them, and probably in a way they had never been loved before. And so, if people converted, it wasn't because she sat there and said, you need to convert. It's because of the humility and the charity that she exhibited. They're like, whatever you got, I want to be like that. And so people would convert because of that. And so her goal was she was picking up people off the street, and some of these people, and they were like had open wounds, and they were lepers, and they were like picking maggots out of their sores and doing all this stuff, and they were doing it with joy. And she made a comment when she says, it's not amazing that we do this, it's amazing that we find joy in doing this. And she said, I can't do this by myself. This is Christ working through me. I couldn't do this apart from God. And so part of their spirituality is that they would get up at like 4 a.m. They would have mass somewhere after that, but they would also have at least an hour of adoration. And that's how they would start their day, because they were basically powered by the Eucharist. And they said, we go out into the poor, we go out and we find Christ in the people that are there. And so just this intense love of neighbor that they would exhibit, that was just like, I can't even comprehend it, right? They would just go out there and to find people that are this sick, and they would find orphans. There's orphans everywhere because people are dying, and then the kids are walking the streets, and they would bring these kids in and they would teach them, and they would start these little classrooms, and they would have these little schools, and this stuff starts to spread. Well, as 1950 rolls around, Rome they're like, we think we want to approve this, but we're going to send a priest out there, and we're going to have him kind of check it out and make sure it's all on the thumbs up kind of thing. And so they send this priest out, and he's a super nice priest too. And Mother Teresa just would not talk to him though. He's interviewing everybody, and he's like, I want to talk to Mother Teresa, and she's just like, no, I don't know. And nobody could really figure this out. And finally, her spiritual director said, look, if you don't talk to him, he's going to put the kibosh on this. He's going to tell Rome no, and this is going to be shut down. And she goes, well, here's why I can't say anything to him about this, or why I'm shy about this, because if I start telling him that Jesus actually told me to do this, right? I wasn't just inspired in prayer. Jesus told me to do this. And I felt like I was in his presence, and I was actually seeing him. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're not going to believe me anyway. And he's like, well, you're going to have to tell them. And so finally she does, and she talks to the priest, and the priest gets done. They get done talking. He says, I was going to recommend that this be shut down, but he says, no, there's real good happening here. He says, I'm going to recommend that this move forward. And she's just taken aback by this. I mean, every time that she needed something to happen, it actually just happens. Whether they need food for the children, or medicine, or a shelter, or whatever, or money for something, it just happens. And now approval for their order. And so now they can work wherever they need to in the Archdiocese. I don't know if it's the Archdiocese of India, or if at the time it was just India, or if it's just Calcutta. But this started to spread, and they started to have people going off and doing other little satellite things. So there'd be an orphanage, and there'd be a school, and there'd be a hospice, and they'd have all these things going on. And, word starts to get out about this. It starts to kind of spread. By 1965, they have requests from people in Venezuela, I think it was either Zimbabwe or Zambia, I can't remember which one it was, and Rome. They want to start an order there. And so they can't do that though, because it's just supposed to be in that Archdiocese until they talk to the Pope. And so the Pope says, all right, come to Rome and we'll talk about it. And so Mother Teresa and two of her nuns are like, we don't have any money. How are we going to get to Rome? And so they go to the airline and they go, we want 3 tickets to Rome. And they go, okay, that's like whatever it was. And she says, well, we don't have any money. And so she's like, well, you have to pay for the airfare. And she goes, well, we don't have any money. Is there anything you can do? She says, well, let me talk to my boss. She goes there and talks to her boss. The boss comes out. The boss was one of her former students from when she was in the convent and loved her so much. He goes, I'm going to give you 3 passages to Rome. He says, I'm going to cover it. So they get to Rome. They get to talk to Pope Paul VI. Pope Paul VI says, yep, this. You guys are doing great work. You have permission to have this spread beyond your archdiocese. So great. So things start springing up in Venezuela and Africa and Rome and all these different places. And even there was even things like in some of the Eastern European nations, which were still behind the Iron Curtain, which were still, part of the communist bloc. There was little orders of those popping up there too. And this thing is just spreading like wildfire. And so, people would just see Mother Teresa, and they just knew they were in the presence of somebody holy. There was just an air about her. She was about like 4'6", and she was just a very small woman, but she was a force to be reckoned with. She wasn't overbearing, she wasn't anything, but she was just fierce in her love of the Lord, and just people could see that in her, and basically money just started coming in, and she, would just take it. Well, we're going to build this area over here for some of the kids, for some of the orphans. We're going to build a little town for them. So money comes in, and it happens. And people said, well, where's this come from? She says, well, if God thinks it's a good idea, money just kind of comes in and it happens. And somebody asked her, well, what if he doesn't think it's a bad idea? Or what if he thinks it's a bad idea? She goes, well, money will come in later for it, or it just doesn't come in. But she says that I will never refuse him anything he asks of me. And so all these things just start happening. All these opportunities start presenting themselves. By 1979, she actually wins the Nobel Peace Prize, which, again, she was just wanted to be this little nun working in the slums of Calcutta, and now she's winning the Nobel Peace Prize, which is it comes with like $1 million prize, is what it comes with, and all this notoriety and things like. So she's got to go give speeches and do all this kind of stuff, and she's like, I just want to help the poor, But now but she also realizes that this is spreading what's going on, and so her work just continues to spread. And then by the time the mid-90s roll around, there's like 4,000 sisters. They're in 123 countries. There's 600 foundations. And this started in 1950. It was insane how this thing grew. But it did, and people were really, they were really drawn to this because, again, I don't know how much you guys know about that time in history, but like after World War I and World War II, the world was in tatters. People were just like shell-shocked because so many people had died. We had had 2 major wars in like 20 years. And so this idea about helping people and unconditionally loving them was like, yeah, people were like, the other stuff's not working and we would need to try this. And so, and during this time, the Cold War is going on. I don't know how much you guys know about that, but nobody trusts anybody. But yet these nuns and some lay people are helping them out too. Thousands of lay people are helping out, kind of in another branch of this. And the idea of doing this is just spreading like crazy. And so Mother Teresa, again, so she's born in 1910, mid-1990s. She's like 80, 85 years old, right? And she's traveling the world. She's doing all this stuff. There's pictures of her. Her and Pope John Paul became good friends. If you look in your book there at the top of page 127, there's a picture of Pope John Paul and her. They had a great friendship. Every time she was going by Rome, she'd stop in. She had an open invitation to be with him. He'd see her when he'd go on his travels. They just had this tremendous friendship, and he helped her with whatever she needed for her order as well. But she knew her time was getting short. She was 85, 86 years old now. And her biggest fear was that she had become so famous that she knew that when she died, people were going to, the whole world would be like, oh no. And she's like, I don't want that. I just want to die. I just want to kind of be, and then somebody takes over the order and the work moves on. It's about the work. It's about Jesus. It's not about me. And so by some strange pattern in God's providence, and I remember the night this happened, I was over at a friend's house, and the news comes on, and it says, and Princess Diana, who was the ex-wife of Prince Charles, who's now King Charles, she dies in a car crash. And so you guys know how kind of everybody the media just swarms around the royalty, right? So there's all this stuff going on, and there's all this footage about the car crash and all these interviews and all this stuff going on, and oh, by the way, Mother Teresa died. But now Princess Diana and all this kind of stuff like this is going on. And that's exactly what Mother Teresa wanted. She didn't want everybody to be bemoaning her, because she's like, I'm just a person in this. The work goes beyond me. And like she used to say, she goes, I may not be able to move the ocean, but I can cast a rock at it and see the ripples go out from there. And so the idea is that by casting that rock in there, it affects everything out from there. And so she just saw herself as that little pebble. So, you know, she does wind up having a state funeral, and leaders from around the world do come, but it's just, you know, it was just like, they knew, everybody knew this woman's going to be a saint. In fact, John Paul II, he waived, you're supposed to wait at least 5 years to open up the case for canonization. He waited 2 years. And he says, you know, yes, because there are already miracles, you know, to her credit, and they're just like, yeah, we need to get the ball rolling on this. And so she was beatified in 2003, which was only 6 years after she died, and then she was canonized in 2016. That's a typo in your book there. It should be, she was canonized in 2016 by Pope Francis. And so she's only been a saint, Teresa of Calcutta, for 6 years. But like I said, even from when I was a kid and I heard about her, we all knew she was going to be a saint. It was just a question of when. And so this idea, the takeaway from this is just this radical love of neighbor that she had, this unconditional love of people who were in conditions worse than her. And, you know, she didn't have any money, so it wasn't like she was just throwing money at it. She just went out and helped them. And so if any of you guys have done Love Begins, how many of you guys have done Love Begins here in the diocese? Anybody? A few of you? I would recommend you, when that comes around, sign up for that. It'll be in a few months. I would recommend you do that. Mother Teresa was the inspiration for that. We go out as middle school students in groups and go out and basically do the types of stuff. Yeah, we're not like picking up dead people and picking their sores and all that kind of stuff, but we are like weeding gardens, and we're doing all this menial labor, working in food pantries, all this kind of stuff, just providing service for those, you know, and we don't ask for anything in return. And it's really a pretty cool thing. And you'll learn more about Mother Teresa at that as well, because she was the inspiration for the woman in our diocese, Lindsay, who started this thing. And again, it just seems to be kind of taken off. So, do you guys have any questions about Mother Teresa? There is one more thing about Mother Teresa that I did forget about, and I forgot about in the DTS talk too, that after she died, in her, I don't know if it was her biography or part of her diary or something like that, basically it was discovered that she had had a spiritual dryness since about the time when her order was approved. So remember I told you that she was seeing Jesus and Mary, or at least feeling like they were telling her stuff. And they were giving her the instructions from like 1946 to like 1950 or so. But after 1950, basically all that dried up. And it wasn't like it was just suddenly, she wasn't having those consolations. It was like whenever she would be in prayer, she felt like God had abandoned her. And so even though she was doing all this stuff, so when you see video of her and you see pictures of her, she's almost always smiling. You know, she just has this joy, and she told her nuns, if you're not joyful, you can't be part of the order. So she's doing this, and in her intense prayer life, she feels like God's abandoned her for almost 50 years. And that's intense. I mean, I don't know how you guys are in your prayer life, but sometimes, I think a lot of us come to church and we just feel like we're in this room and, nothing's going on and God's not here, okay? But she had felt the presence of Christ and felt the presence of Mary. And then suddenly when you feel that amount of joy, that amount of consolation, and then that's taken away, that's intense. That's enough to maybe make you lose your faith. And yet she persevered through that. And so if you ever feel like you're having a difficult time praying, or you kind of feel like, things are really dry and things aren't happening and nothing's really going on, Mother Teresa is a great saint to pray to for that, because she lived that in this. And again, like I said, I would encourage you to watch some videos of her on YouTube or listen to some of her talks or something like that. It's amazing what she did when she was going through that level of spiritual dryness. It was basically a dark night of the soul for almost 50 years. And dark night of the soul is something that very few people experience, only some of the really, really intense saints. Whenever you join an order, oftentimes you change your name. It's just kind of like when the Pope gets elected, he changes his name. A lot of times when brothers or sisters become part of an order, once they take their final vows, or at least once they're in the novitiate, I think, is they're given another name, basically after someone who they emulate, someone who they look up to is often what it is, or somebody who they are reminded of. So she was after Saint Teresa de Lisieux, and so the idea, if you guys remember anything about her, I think we did her last year. She would do small things with great love was one of her things as part of her little way, and that's one of the things that Mother Teresa brought into hers too. And that's another thing she's known for saying is do small things with great love. So she would just make a prayer out of her everyday little chores. And so when she was doing, when she was helping the dying, or when she was working with the orphans, who maybe, or the lepers, she was just doing these things that maybe most of us would be like repulsed by, but she would intentionally do that with great love. And so that's how she spread her joy. So at the top of that page, you're at the next blank spot. You just want to put Wednesday, October 26, 2022. And the title of this one, and see if you can kind of pick out why I chose this one tonight about Mother Teresa. It's called The Brick. Okay. So just listen to this and then just kind of reflect on this and maybe see how you see Mother Teresa in here, or maybe, and then relate that to your life. About, maybe when you hear the situation, maybe see how this relates to your life as well. So it says, a young and successful executive was traveling down a neighborhood street, going a bit too fast in his new Jaguar. He was watching for kids darting out from between parked cars and slowed down when he thought he saw something. As his car passed, no children appeared. Instead, a brick smashed into the Jag's side door. He slammed on the brakes and backed up the Jag back to the spot where the brick had been thrown. The angry driver then jumped out of the car, grabbed the nearest kid, and pushed him up against the parked car, shouting, "What was that all about? And who are you? Just what the heck are you doing? That's a new car, and that brick you threw is going to cost a lot of money. Why did you do it?" The young boy was apologetic. "Please, mister, please. I'm sorry, but I didn't know what else to do," he pleaded. "I threw the brick because no one else would stop." With tears dripping down his face and off his chin, the youth pointed to a spot just around the parked car. "It's my brother," he said. "He rolled off the curb and fell out of his wheelchair, and I can't lift him up." Now sobbing, the boy asked the stunned executive, "Would you please help me get him back into his wheelchair? He's hurt and he's too heavy for me." Moved beyond words, the driver tried to swallow the rapidly swelling lump in his throat. He hurriedly lifted the handicapped boy back into his wheelchair, then took out a linen handkerchief and dabbed at the fresh scrapes and cuts. A quick look told him everything was going to be okay. "Thank you, and may God bless you," the grateful child told the stranger. Too shook up for words, the man simply watched the boy push his wheelchair-bound brother down the sidewalk toward their home. It was a long, slow walk back to the Jaguar. The damage was very noticeable, but the driver never bothered to repair the dented side door. He kept the dent there to remind him of this message: don't go through life so fast that someone has to throw a brick at you to get your attention. God whispers in our souls and speaks to our hearts. Sometimes when we don't have time to listen, he has to throw a brick at us. It's our choice to listen or not. Think about your life, and are you moving too fast to see what's going on around you? And maybe, have you ever had somebody had to shake you up in order to wake you out of complacency? Think about maybe what was Mother Teresa's brick that woke her up and set her on that path.